The gavel's sharp crack reverberated through the Cleveland Municipal Court, a chilling punctuation to Judge Richardson's dismissive declaration. "Sit down, little ghetto girl. Adults are talking." 17-year-old Maya Williams stood motionless, the weight of every gaze in the packed courtroom pressing upon her. Her father, Marcus Williams, a man of quiet dignity now reduced to a defendant in handcuffs, sat beside her, his head bowed in a posture of profound resignation. Her fervent plea, "Your Honor, my father is innocent," was met with a contemptuous slam of the gavel, followed by the curt instruction, "Security, remove this child." The judge's gesture, dehumanizing in its disdain, singled Maya out as if she were an object of contempt rather than a concerned daughter seeking justice. The gallery offered a tableau of mixed reactions. Some spectators shook their heads in silent disapproval, others openly smirked, a testament to the prevailing cynicism regarding the justice system's impartiality. As a bailiff advanced, Marcus, tears streaming down his face, instinctively reached for his daughter with shackled hands, a gesture of paternal despair. The prosecutor, shuffling papers with thinly veiled amusement, embodied the institutional indifference Maya was beginning to confront. Yet, amidst this hostile environment, Maya did not yield. A subtle transformation began. Her spine straightened, her chin lifted with defiance, and her eyes narrowed with a laser-like intensity. In that pivotal moment, surrounded by an overwhelming tide of scorn, an acute awareness of injustice ignited something profound and dangerous within her. Just 3 months prior, Maya Williams had been immersed in a world of intellectual pursuit, cross-legged on her bedroom floor, surrounded by towering stacks of yellowed law books. Their cramped East Cleveland apartment, a tangible reflection of their modest economic circumstances, seemed to shrink with each passing year, yet these worn texts offered an infinite expanse for her mind. "Dad, why do you keep all these old law books if you're just a construction worker?" Maya inquired, holding aloft a battered copy of Constitutional Law. Marcus Williams appeared in her doorway, still clad in his work clothes, concrete dust clinging to his boots. His calloused, weathered hands bore the testament of 2 decades spent laboring to build other people's dreams, embodying the physical toll of blue-collar work in America. But his eyes, sharp and intelligent, the very same eyes Maya had inherited, narrated a different story, one of unfulfilled intellectual aspirations and a deep-seated belief in the power of knowledge. "Because knowledge is the one thing they can't take from us, baby girl," he explained, settling beside her on the floor. "I may work with my hands, but I think with my mind. These books, they're insurance." Maya traced the worn spine of a civil rights case study, her curiosity piqued. "Insurance against what?" Marcus remained silent for a long moment, observing his daughter's fingers moving across the legal text with the intuitive grace of a musician reading sheet music. "Against a world that tries to make you small," he finally articulated, his words resonating with the quiet wisdom of lived experience. At 17, Maya already possessed a formidable academic record, securing partial scholarships to 3 universities. Her guidance counselor lauded her as college material, and her teachers consistently praised her natural intelligence. However, none were privy to the midnight hours she dedicated to these very law books, meticulously absorbing precedents and procedures with the same intensity other adolescents devoted to social media. Her bedroom walls, far from the typical adolescent shrine to pop culture, were a testament to her unique interests, adorned with taped-up landmark Supreme Court decisions. Brown v. Board of Education, Miranda v. Arizona, Gideon v. Wainwright. Each case represented a hard-won victory for individuals historically marginalized or counted out by the system, mirroring the broader struggle for civil liberties and due process that captivated Maya. "Maya, dinner," her mother, Denise, called from the kitchen. The Williams family gathered around their small table every night without fail, a ritualistic communion that served as their sanctuary, their planning room, their crucible of dreams. Tonight, like every other night, Marcus engaged Maya about her day, listening intently and challenging her to intellectual depths. "Mrs. Peterson says I should consider pre-law at Howard," Maya shared, pausing between bites of her mother's renowned mac and cheese. "Howard's expensive," Denise noted carefully, her words betraying the constant financial strain despite working double shifts at the hospital. "We'll find a way," Marcus declared firmly, his conviction unwavering. "Maya's got something special. You can see it in how she thinks, how she questions everything." Maya gazed at her father, this man who rose at 5 a.m. daily, returned bone-tired, yet consistently assisted her with homework and championed her aspirations, no matter how daunting they seemed. "I want to be a lawyer," she stated quietly. "Not just any lawyer. I want to be the kind who fights for people like us." Marcus smiled, that same resilient smile that had sustained him through years of being overlooked and underestimated. "Then that's exactly what you'll be," he affirmed. Their meticulously constructed world, however, was poised for an abrupt and brutal shattering. The call arrived on a Tuesday morning as Maya prepared for school. Marcus had been employed on a significant construction project downtown, a new office building destined to house prestigious law firms and financial companies, precisely the kind of edifice he would help build, but never be permitted to enter or work within as a professional. The job site was notoriously hazardous, and safety violations were endemic, a common plight for workers in an industry often prioritizing profit over human welfare. Yet, the precarious economic reality meant that workers like Marcus could not voice complaints without risking immediate termination. When Marcus observed a crane operator showing up visibly intoxicated, jeopardizing the entire crew, his conscience compelled him to act. He confronted his supervisor, Jake Morrison, a man whose management style was characterized by a dehumanizing disregard for the predominantly black and Hispanic crew, treating them as expendable cogs in a machine. "Morrison, Rodriguez is drunk on the crane. Someone's going to get killed," Marcus asserted, his tone urgent. Morrison barely glanced up from his clipboard. "Mind your business, Williams. You're paid to build, not think." "I'm paid to go home alive," Marcus retorted, his voice unwavering. "And so is everyone else here." It was then that Morrison's volatile temper erupted. He shoved Marcus forcefully, spewing invective about uppity workers who don't know their place. Marcus stumbled backward, his hard hat clattering to the ground. The other workers watched in tense silence, a familiar tableau of Morrison's explosive rage and his particular animosity toward anyone who dared to question his authority. Marcus steadied himself, his voice calm but firm. "Touch me again, and we'll have a problem." Morrison initiated the physical altercation. What transpired next unfolded in less than 30 seconds, yet it irrevocably altered the trajectory of their lives. Marcus defended himself, pushing Morrison away when the supervisor lunged at him again. Morrison fell, hitting his head on a stack of rebar. By the time the police arrived, Morrison, leveraging his position of power, had meticulously crafted a narrative painting Marcus as the aggressor. The security cameras, suspiciously, had malfunctioned during the precise time frame of the incident. The crew, paralyzed by the legitimate fear of job loss, remained silent, their collective silence a powerful indicator of the economic coercion prevalent in such environments. Marcus Williams, honor student's father, devoted husband, a man with an unblemished record, was handcuffed and charged with aggravated assault, and Maya Williams's true education, in the unforgiving realities of the legal system, was about to commence. The Cleveland Public Library, previously a haven for academic exploration, swiftly transformed into Maya's second home, though now by necessity rather than choice. Each morning at 8 a.m. sharp, Maya claimed the same corner table in the legal research section. The librarians, familiar with her tireless pursuit, now knew her by name, The teenager who spent 12 hours a day immersed in case law while her peers occupied themselves with prom dates and typical adolescent concerns. "Honey, we're closing in 10 minutes," Mrs. Lane, a kind-faced librarian, said gently. Maya looked up from her criminal procedure manuals, her eyes red-rimmed and strained from relentless study. "Just 10 more minutes? I'm so close to understanding this precedent." Mrs. Lane's expression softened with a mixture of empathy and concern. She had witnessed Maya's profound transformation from a bright, eager student into a desperate, determined advocate. "You can't save him if you collapse from exhaustion," she advised. But Maya found herself unable to cease. Every hour not spent researching felt like another nail being hammered into the coffin of her father's freedom. The public defender assigned to Marcus was David Garrett, an attorney visibly burned out by an overwhelming caseload of 47 active files, a stark illustration of the underfunded and overstretched nature of public defense systems across the nation. When Maya and her mother met him, he barely glanced up from his computer, his demeanor betraying a profound disinterest. Williams, he muttered, cursor clicking through digital files. "Ah, yes, the construction assault. Pretty straightforward. Prosecution's offering 2 years if he pleads guilty. I'd take it." Maya's hands clenched into fists, her frustration palpable. "But he's innocent. Morrison attacked first." Garrett finally looked at her, his expression a weary blend of pity and professional annoyance. "Sweetheart, that's not how the system works," he explained, a cynical truism. "It's your father's word against the supervisor's. Guess who the jury will believe?" "There were witnesses," Maya insisted. "Witnesses who want to keep their jobs," Garrett countered dismissively, pulling out a plea form. "Look, I've been doing this for 15 years. Black defendant, white victim, construction site altercation. The math is simple. 2 years is a gift." Maya's mother, Denise, spoke up quietly, her voice tinged with a desperate hope. "What if we fight it?" Garrett laughed bitterly, a hollow sound. "Then he's looking at 10 years minimum. Aggravated assault, possible hate crime enhancement because Morrison claims Marcus used racial slurs. You really want to roll those dice?" Maya felt the walls closing in, a profound sense of helplessness engulfing her. This man, theoretically tasked with defending her father, had already conceded defeat. "Can't we get a different lawyer?" she asked, a flicker of resolve still burning. "Private attorneys cost $50,000 minimum," Garrett stated matter-of-factly, his gaze challenging. "Do you have $50,000 lying around?" The Williams family returned home that night in silence, the weight of their predicament pressing down upon them. Maya's scholarship letters from Harvard, Yale, and Columbia sat unopened on her desk, once vibrant symbols of her future now feeling increasingly meaningless. It was then, in the quiet desperation of late night, that Maya commenced a deeper, more rigorous investigation. She discovered the Cleveland Municipal Court Records database, a labyrinthine digital archive that took hours to navigate. Once she mastered its complexities, however, a disturbing pattern emerged, impossible to ignore. Judge Harold Richardson had presided over criminal cases for 12 years, his tenure marked by a consistent and alarming trend. Maya meticulously pulled every case file she could access, painstakingly creating spreadsheets that would impress even a seasoned statistician. The numbers narrated a horrifying story of systemic judicial bias. In cases involving black defendants and white victims, Judge Richardson's sentences averaged a staggering 394% higher than state guidelines. Conversely, for white defendants with black victims, sentences averaged 23% below guidelines. Maya stared at her laptop screen at 3:00 a.m., her hands trembling as she compiled the data. 43 black men had faced Judge Richardson in the past 2 years on similar charges. Their average sentence was 8 years. The average sentence for white defendants on identical charges was a mere 18 months. "Oh my God," she whispered into the empty bedroom. the enormity of the injustice dawning on her. But the most insidious aspect wasn't just the statistical pattern, it was how meticulously systematic it appeared. Richardson wasn't merely biased, he was methodically so, operating with a calculated precision that suggested intent. Maya unearthed dismissed cases where white defendants had committed offenses far more egregious than anything Marcus was accused of, receiving probation for assault charges that would have condemned black men to years in prison. Maya printed everything, filling 3 binders with irrefutable evidence of judicial bias that would make civil rights attorneys salivate. A compelling dossier against institutional injustice. But who would heed the voice of a 17-year-old girl in a system designed to protect itself? Maya's world continued to fragment in smaller, more personal ways. "Maya, you missed the college fair meeting again," her guidance counselor, Ms. Rodriguez, said after pulling her aside. "Harvard called asking about your enrollment deposit. Are you having second thoughts?" Maya stared at the acceptance letter, a document that once embodied everything she had meticulously worked for. "I can't go to college while my father sits in prison for something he didn't do." "Maya, honey, I understand you're upset," Ms. Rodriguez responded, her tone laced with a well-meaning but ultimately unhelpful concern. "But you can't throw away your future. Your father wouldn't want that." "My father is facing 10 years because nobody thinks he deserves a real defense," Maya retorted, her voice edged with frustration. Ms. Rodriguez lowered her voice, reflecting the subtle biases that permeate society. Maybe he did do something wrong. Sometimes the people we love aren't who we think they are." The words struck Maya like a physical blow. Even here, in an environment where she had been celebrated as a model student, people assumed her father's guilt based on nothing more than the color of his skin, a pervasive manifestation of racial prejudice embedded within societal perceptions. Maya's best friend, Jessica, cornered her at lunch, her concern tinged with exasperation. "Maya, you're destroying yourself over this. Everyone can see it. You look terrible. Your grades are slipping, and you're throwing away a full ride to Harvard." "My father is innocent," Maya stated quietly, her resolve unyielding. Jessica rolled her eyes, her youthful naivete preventing her from grasping the deeper injustices at play. "Come on, Maya. He attacked his supervisor. There were witnesses. Just because you can't accept it doesn't mean the rest of us have to pretend it didn't happen." "You don't know him," Maya insisted. "I know you're acting crazy. My dad says construction workers get violent all the time, especially when they're drinking or on drugs. Maybe your dad just snapped." Maya stood up slowly, her voice calm but firm. "Your dad has never worked a day of manual labor in his life, and mine has never touched drugs or alcohol." But Jessica, entrenched in her own privileged perspective, was not listening. "Maya, you're choosing him over your own future, over our friendship, over reality. It's not healthy." That afternoon, Maya sat alone in her car outside school, observing her former friends laughing about trivial teenage problems. She felt ancient, as if she had aged years in the past month. Her phone buzzed with notifications. College recruiters, scholarship committees, summer program directors, all opportunities that now felt as distant and unattainable as the moon. Maya drove to the courthouse, parking across the street from the imposing edifice where her father's fate would be decided. She watched lawyers in expensive suits stride up the steps, briefcases in hand, an aura of confidence in every step, embodying the powerful, often exclusive, upper echelons of the legal profession. Then she observed a different demographic, families like hers, clutching public defender business cards, their faces etched with worry lines, a stark visual representation of the two disparate worlds the legal system encompassed. A court clerk emerged for a cigarette break. Maya recognized him from her research visits and approached cautiously. "Excuse me, sir. I'm researching Judge Richardson's court for a school project. Do you know anything about his judicial philosophy?" The clerk, a black man in his 50s, looked around nervously, his guarded demeanor reflecting a pervasive fear within the system. "Little girl, let me give you some free advice. That judge has ended careers for less than what you're probably thinking. If someone you care about is facing him, he shook his head, a gesture of profound resignation. Start praying, or start running. Maya's blood ran cold. What do you mean? The clerk took a long, deliberate drag from his cigarette. Richardson doesn't just sentence folks. He destroys them, makes examples, sends messages, and he's got friends in high places who make sure nobody questions his methods. But that's illegal, Maya protested, her idealism clashing with the harsh reality. There have to be oversight mechanisms, appeals processes. The clerk laughed bitterly, a sound devoid of humor. Child, you still believe the system works the way they taught you in civics class. Richardson's been doing this for 12 years. You think nobody's noticed? You think nobody's tried to stop him? Maya felt her knees go weak. What happened to them? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Transfer requests denied. Bar complaints dismissed. Career advancement blocked. The clerk dropped his cigarette and ground it under his heel. That man has power you can't imagine. And your daddy? He looked at Maya with genuine pity. Your daddy's just another number to him. As the clerk walked away, Maya stood alone on the courthouse steps, the crushing weight of impossibility settling on her shoulders. Her father was facing a rigged system, a biased judge, and a legal process designed to consume and discard people like him. She was 17 years old, with no money, no connections, and no formal legal training. But as Maya stood there watching the sun set behind the courthouse dome, something vital crystallized inside her. They expected her to give up. They expected her to accept the inevitable. They had no idea who they were dealing with. The jail visitation room smelled of disinfectant and despair, an olfactory representation of institutional confinement. Maya pressed her palm against the scratched plexiglass barrier, observing her father on the other side. In just 3 weeks, Marcus Williams had aged a decade. His shoulders, once broad and strong from years of construction work, now sagged with an unbearable weight of defeat. The orange jumpsuit hung loosely on his shrinking frame, a stark visual of his physical and emotional decline. But it was his eyes that truly broke Maya's heart. The same intelligent eyes that once lit up when discussing her future now stared blankly at the table. Baby girl, Marcus said through the phone, his voice barely above a whisper, laced with a crushing resignation. Maybe I should just take the plea deal. 2 years. I can survive 2 years. Maya's throat tightened, a visceral rejection of his surrender. Dad, no. You didn't do anything wrong. Wrong doesn't matter in here, Marcus countered, gesturing around the visiting room, filled with other families engaged in equally desperate conversations. Look around, Maya. You see any of these people getting justice? You see any fair trials? Maya followed his gaze. In every corner, black and brown families clutched phones, tears streaming down their faces, children asking when Daddy was coming home, wives struggling to hold shattered lives together. This was the reality of disproportionate incarceration and systemic inequality, a landscape of broken families and shattered dreams. This is my reality now, Marcus continued, his voice heavy with fatalism. And I can't let you sacrifice your life trying to change it. Harvard is calling about your enrollment. Your mother told me you have to go. I'm not leaving you here, Maya insisted, her voice trembling with emotion. Marcus leaned forward, pressing his hand against the glass opposite hers, a poignant gesture of connection across an insurmountable divide. Maya, listen to me. I've watched you your whole life. Watched you read those law books like they were fairy tales. You were born for something bigger than this place. I was born to fight for my family, Maya declared, her resolve hardening. Then fight for us by becoming what you're meant to be, Marcus implored. Don't let them destroy 2 Williams' lives. 1 is enough. Everyone, it seemed, wanted her to walk away, to accept that some battles were simply unwinnable, that the powerful forces of the system were immutable. That night, Maya sat in her bedroom surrounded by college acceptance letters, her laptop open to housing applications. The rational, pragmatic choice was obvious. Accept the Harvard scholarship, build a successful career, perhaps return in 2 decades to enact change from within the system. But as she reached for the enrollment forms, her hand brushed against one of her father's old law books. The worn copy of constitutional law fell open serendipitously to the Sixth Amendment. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. Maya stared at those words until they blurred. Assistance of counsel. Her father had counsel, a burned-out public defender who had already surrendered. But what if? Maya's fingers flew across her keyboard, searching legal databases with a newfound, desperate purpose. She was no longer seeking assault precedents. She was looking for something entirely different. Ferretta v. California, 1975. The Supreme Court ruled that defendants have a constitutional right to represent themselves in criminal proceedings. Maya's heart started racing, but self-representation alone wasn't enough. Her father needed help, and she had spent months internalizing his case better than any lawyer. She dug deeper. People v. Sharp, Ohio, Court of Appeals, 1987. The court recognized limited circumstances where family members could assist pro se defendants, particularly when the defendant had been denied adequate counsel. Maya cross-referenced the ruling with Ohio's current statutes. There it was, buried in Section 841.2 of the Ohio Criminal Code. A pro se defendant may request familial assistance in cases where counsel has been deemed inadequate, subject to court approval. The legal loophole existed. It was narrow, rarely utilized, and would necessitate proving that Garrett's representation was indeed inadequate. But it was there. Maya printed the cases, her hands shaking with a potent mix of excitement and adrenaline. For the first time in weeks, she felt hope crackling through her veins. Maya's profound transformation began that very night. She cleared her desk of college applications, replacing them with legal pads, case files, and procedural manuals. Her bedroom, once a sanctuary, became a war room. She commenced with the fundamentals, memorizing every rule of criminal procedure, every evidence standard, every objection protocol. While her classmates studied for calculus tests, Maya immersed herself in cross-examination techniques. The public library, her de facto law school, welcomed her each morning as its doors opened, and she remained at her corner table until closing. She took meticulous notes on every aspect of trial strategy, jury selection, opening statement structures, closing argument techniques. Mrs. Lane, the librarian, observed Maya's evolution with growing concern. "Maya, dear, are you eating enough? You look thinner every day." Maya glanced up from a witness examination manual. "I'm fine, Mrs. Lane, just focused." "What you're doing, sweetie, it's remarkable," Mrs. Lane conceded. "But it's also impossible. You know that, right?" Maya met her gaze, an unwavering resolve in her eyes. "Impossible," she articulated, "is just another word for something nobody's tried hard enough to achieve." Day by day, Maya's confidence solidified. She practiced opening statements in her bedroom mirror, rehearsing until every word flowed with natural conviction. She memorized case citations, evidence rules, and procedural statutes until they became second nature. But mere knowledge was insufficient. Maya needed to comprehend her adversary. She dedicated hours to researching Judge Richardson's background, his education, his career trajectory, every interview he had granted, every speech delivered at legal conferences. Richardson had meticulously cultivated a reputation for being tough on crime, a euphemism Maya realized, for being harsh on individuals who resembled her father. He had campaigned for his judicial seat on a platform of restoring order and ending the revolving door of justice, rhetoric often employed to justify punitive sentencing practices. The more Maya learned about Richardson, the deeper her understanding of the formidable challenge she faced. This was not merely a biased judge. This was a man who had constructed his entire career upon the systemic oppression of people like her father. Yet, Maya also unearthed another crucial detail. Richardson's reputation, while formidable, was not entirely unblemished. Whispers had circulated over the years, complaints regarding his conduct, subtle questions raised about his sentencing patterns. Nothing had ever gained traction, however, because no one had been courageous or methodical enough to compile the evidence systematically. Maya, without fully realizing it, had been compiling precisely that evidence for weeks. 3 days before the trial, Maya made her decision. She walked into the jail for what everyone presumed would be her final farewell visit. "Dad," she began, picking up the phone and looking directly into his eyes, her voice steady with newfound purpose. "I found a way to represent you in court." Marcus stared at her, dumbfounded. "Baby girl, what are you talking about?" "There's a legal provision that allows family members to assist pro se defendants when their counsel is inadequate," Maya explained, her voice gaining strength. "I can be your voice in that courtroom." "Maya, no!" Marcus protested, his fear palpable. "You're 17 years old. You don't know what you're up against." Maya's voice hardened with unyielding resolve. "I know exactly what I'm up against. A corrupt judge who's built his career destroying people like us. A system that assumes you're guilty because of your skin color." She leaned forward, pressing her hand against the glass, a symbolic gesture of unity. "But Dad, I also know something else. I know every case Richardson has tried in the past 5 years. I know every legal precedent that applies to your situation. I know the law better than that public defender ever will." Marcus studied his daughter's face, witnessing a profound transformation. The fierce determination in her eyes, the steel in her voice, the metamorphosis from a scared teenager into a formidable advocate. "And I know," Maya continued, "that knowledge is the one thing they can't take from us. You taught me that, remember?" For the first time in weeks, Marcus Williams smiled. Not the defeated smile of a broken man, but the proud, hopeful smile of a father watching his daughter become everything he had always known she could be. "Then let's go to war, baby girl," he declared, his voice imbued with a renewed fighting spirit. 2 days before the trial, Maya sat outside Morrison Construction Company, patiently observing workers depart. She had waited 3 hours for Carlos, the security guard listed as unavailable for comment in the police report, a suspicious detail that had piqued her investigative instincts. At 6:47 p.m., she spotted him walking toward the parking lot. "Excuse me, Carlos," she called out. He turned, immediately wary. "Who's asking?" "Maya Williams. Marcus Williams is my father." Carlos's face went pale, a clear indication of his unease. "I can't talk to you. I told the police everything." "Did you?" Maya challenged, her tone gently probing. "The report says you were unavailable for comment." Carlos stopped walking, his internal conflict evident. "Kid, I got mouths to feed. I can't lose this job." Maya showed him a news article detailing her father's plight. "They're sending my father to prison for 10 years for something he didn't do. You saw what really happened." "I saw nothing," he insisted, though his voice cracked with emotional strain. "My father was protecting your crew from a drunk crane operator. Morrison attacked first, didn't he?" Carlos lit a cigarette with shaking hands, the gesture revealing his inner turmoil. "Morrison's connected. His family owns half the construction contracts in this city. People who cross him don't work here anymore. And people who let innocent men go to prison?" Maya's piercing gaze, mirroring the same steel she had seen in her father, made Carlos pause. "There's security footage," he said quietly, the words barely audible. Maya's heart stopped. "What?" "The cameras weren't broken like Morrison claimed. I saved everything." Carlos looked around, then made a quick, decisive choice. "Follow me." They walked to the office building. Carlos used his key card, leading Maya to the security office. "Morrison told me to delete this," Carlos explained, sitting at the monitors, his voice low. said the hard drives crashed. But you didn't. He paused, a flicker of his own past pain in his eyes. My sister was assaulted 2 years ago. The guy got off. No evidence. I swore I'd never let that happen again. The screen flickered to life, displaying various construction site camera angles. Carlos fast-forwarded to the incident timestamp. There's your dad talking to Morrison about Rodriguez on the crane. Maya watched, mesmerized, as the footage revealed her father calmly approaching Morrison, gesturing toward the unsteady crane operator. Morrison's body language was aggressively confrontational from the outset. "Watch this," Carlos instructed. On screen, Morrison shoved Marcus hard. Her father stumbled backward, hands raised peacefully in a gesture of de-escalation. Morrison advanced again, swinging wildly. Only then did Marcus defend himself with one controlled push that sent Morrison into the rebar stack. "Morrison came at your dad like a maniac," Carlos confirmed. "Textbook self-defense." Maya stared at the screen, tears streaming down her face, tears of vindication and profound relief. Here was undeniable proof of her father's innocence, concrete evidence against a meticulously constructed lie. "Why didn't you come forward?" Maya asked, her voice choked with emotion. Carlos ejected the USB drive. "Because Morrison made clear what happens to people who cross him." He handed Maya the drive. "But some things are more important than paychecks." Maya clutched the USB drive like precious gold. "This changes everything." "Maybe," Carlos cautioned, his expression growing serious. "But Maya, Morrison's brother-in-law owns Richardson and Associates, Judge Richardson's family business. They've been steering city contracts to each other for years." The disparate pieces of the puzzle clicked into place for Maya. "That's why Richardson is determined to convict my father. It's not just bias, it's business. That judge protects Morrison's interests," Carlos elaborated, confirming Maya's chilling realization. "Workers who complain about safety violations end up in his courtroom facing trumped-up charges. Your dad's case is part of a pattern." Maya's mind raced, synthesizing the information. She now possessed not only evidence to prove her father's innocence, but also irrefutable proof of corruption extending to the highest echelons of the city's judiciary. "Carlos, will you testify?" He nodded slowly, his decision made. "If you guarantee my family's safety, yeah. It's time someone stood up to these people." Maya walked to her car, carrying more than just evidence. She carried the key to exposing an entire network of systemic corruption. As she drove home, one thought resonated powerfully. They weren't just saving her father. They were bringing down an entire system of injustice. The morning of the trial, Maya walked into the Cleveland Municipal Courthouse, carrying 3 thick binders, her posture radiating a quiet, determined strength. Media cameras flashed, their lenses capturing the image of the teenager representing her father, a narrative that had swiftly become a compelling news story. Inside the packed courtroom, every seat was occupied. Maya spotted her mother in the front row, clutching a tissue, her face a mixture of anxiety and hope. Behind her sat Marcus's construction crew, a visible testament of solidarity, having taken time off work they could ill afford. On the other side of the courtroom, Morrison sat with his expensive legal team, a smug expression fixed on his face, embodying the arrogance of entrenched power. Judge Richardson entered, his black robes flowing like a cape, a theatrical flourish that underscored his authority. The bailiff called for order as everyone stood. Maya felt the hundreds of eyes on her as she took her place at the defense table next to her father. Marcus squeezed her hand, a silent exchange of fear and pride. "You sure about this, baby girl?" he whispered. Maya straightened her shoulders, her gaze unwavering. "I've never been more sure of anything." The prosecutor, District Attorney Kevin Walsh, was a political climber known for his aggressive tactics and an almost perfect conviction rate, a track record that often came at the expense of justice for the vulnerable. He had already given 3 television interviews, confidently framing the case as a clear example of workplace violence that cannot be tolerated, effectively poisoning the public perception. Judge Richardson banged his gavel. This court is now in session. I understand there's been an unusual request regarding representation. Maya stood, her voice steady despite the frantic beating of her heart. Your Honor, my name is Maya Williams. I'm here to invoke my client's right to familial assistance under Ohio Criminal Code Section 841.2. The courtroom erupted in murmurs, a ripple of shock passing through the spectators. Judge Richardson's face darkened, his irritation palpable. Young lady, this is highly irregular. Are you telling me you intend to represent the defendant? I'm telling you that my father, Marcus Williams, is exercising his constitutional right to self-representation with familial assistance, as established in Ferretta v. California and recognized under Ohio statute, Maya articulated with precise legal terminology. Prosecutor Walsh sprang to his feet, his outrage feigned yet effective. Your Honor, this is absurd. A 17-year-old child cannot possibly provide adequate legal representation. This is a serious felony case, not a high school mock trial. Maya, prepared for this very challenge, pulled out her legal brief, her hands now remarkably steady. Your Honor, if I may direct the court's attention to People v. Sharp, Ohio Court of Appeals, 1987, which specifically allows familial assistance when appointed counsel has been deemed inadequate. Judge Richardson's jaw tightened, his control visibly faltering. And what makes you think Mr. Garrett's representation is inadequate? The fact that Mr. Garrett advised my father to plead guilty to a crime he didn't commit without reviewing crucial evidence or interviewing key witnesses. He spent exactly 14 minutes on this case before recommending a plea deal, Maya stated plainly, the raw truth exposing the systemic failure of public defense. The gallery gasped, a collective expression of shock. David Garrett, the public defender, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his professional shortcomings laid bare. Judge Richardson leaned forward, his voice dripping with condescension, a tactic designed to intimidate. Miss Williams, let me explain something. This is not a game. This is not a movie where plucky teenagers save the day. This is a court of law where serious adults handle serious matters. Maya met his gaze without flinching, her resolve unwavering. With respect, Your Honor, my father's freedom is the most serious matter in my life. I've spent the last month studying every aspect of this case more thoroughly than anyone else in this room. You've spent a month? Judge Richardson scoffed, a derisive laugh echoing through the courtroom. I've been practicing law for 30 years. Mr. Walsh has been prosecuting felonies for 15 years. You think 1 month of reading makes you qualified to? I think 1 month of caring makes me more qualified than a public defender who couldn't be bothered to return our phone calls, Maya interrupted, her voice cutting through his contempt. The courtroom fell silent, the audacity of her challenge hanging in the air. Judge Richardson's face flushed crimson with rage. Young lady, you will not interrupt this court. One more outburst and I'll hold you in contempt. Maya bowed her head slightly. My apologies, Your Honor. I was simply exercising my client's rights under established legal precedent. Prosecutor Walsh, seeing an opening, pounced. Your Honor, even if we allow this circus to continue, the defendant's guilt is clear. We have witness testimony, physical evidence, and a pattern of aggressive behavior. This is an open and shut case. Maya stood again, her voice firm. Your Honor, the prosecution's case is built on lies, suppressed evidence, and witness intimidation. I can prove that every single allegation against my father is false. Judge Richardson's eyes narrowed dangerously. Miss Williams, those are serious accusations. Do you have any idea what you're suggesting? I'm suggesting that the truth matters, Your Honor, even in your courtroom, Maya declared, her words hanging in the air like a direct challenge to his integrity and the impartiality of his court. Judge Richardson's voice dropped to a whisper, yet it somehow carried through the entire room, chilling in its menace. Miss Williams, you are walking on very thin ice. I suggest you remember where you are and who you're addressing. Maya felt every person in the courtroom holding their breath. This was the moment of truth. She could retract, apologize, and hope for mercy. Or she could stand her ground and fight for her father's life. She thought about the 43 black men Judge Richardson had systematically condemned, their families and communities shattered by disproportionate sentences. Maya lifted her chin and looked directly into Judge Richardson's eyes. Your Honor, I know exactly where I am. I'm in a courtroom where my innocent father is facing 10 years in prison because the system failed him. I know exactly who I'm addressing. A judge who took an oath to ensure justice is served fairly and impartially. The silence was deafening, the tension palpable. Judge Richardson's knuckles were white as he gripped his gavel, his authority challenged by a mere teenager. Your Honor, Maya continued, her voice growing stronger, I respectfully request that you allow me to present evidence that will prove my father's innocence and expose the real criminal in this case. Judge Richardson stared at her for a long moment, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. Finally, he spoke, his voice strained. Miss Williams, against my better judgment and the standards of this court, I will allow you to proceed. But understand this. Any disruption, any violation of procedure, any disrespect to this court, and your father will face the maximum penalty under the law. Maya nodded, her victory a small but significant breach in the system's defenses. Thank you, Your Honor. The defense is ready to proceed. As she sat down, Maya caught her father's eye. Marcus looked at her with a mixture of terror and profound pride. She had just declared war on one of the most powerful men in the city's legal system, and Judge Richardson had reluctantly accepted her challenge. Prosecutor Walsh rose from his table, a predatory smile spreading across his face. He had prosecuted hundreds of cases, and this 17-year-old girl, he believed, was about to learn why he had never lost. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Walsh began, his voice booming with a practiced authority. What you're about to witness is exactly why children don't belong in courtrooms. The defendant, Marcus Williams, has a documented history of workplace violence that his daughter conveniently forgot to mention. Maya's blood ran cold. What history? Her father had never been arrested before this incident. Walsh pulled out a thick file. 3 separate complaints filed against the defendant over the past 2 years. Aggressive behavior towards supervisors, threats against management, a pattern of escalating violence that culminated in the brutal attack on Jake Morrison. Maya shot to her feet. Objection. Those documents were never disclosed during discovery. Judge Richardson barely glanced at her. Overruled. The prosecution has the right to present all relevant evidence. But, Your Honor, Maya interjected, Brady v. Maryland requires... Miss Williams, I will not have you lecturing this court on case law you learned last week. Sit down, Walsh continued, emboldened by the judge's bias. The defense wants you to believe this was self-defense, but the evidence shows a man who'd been building toward this explosion for months. A man who finally snapped and attacked an innocent supervisor doing his job. Maya's hands shook as she frantically flipped through her notes. None of this was in the original case file. These complaints had appeared out of nowhere, perfectly timed to destroy her father's credibility. Furthermore, Walsh added, pulling out a series of photographs, the defendant's injuries were minimal compared to the severe trauma inflicted on Mr. Morrison. These photos show a man who was beaten within an inch of his life. The photos, passed to the jury, depicted Morrison with a heavily bandaged head, his face swollen and bruised. Maya stared in shock. Her father had barely touched Morrison according to the security footage. How could Morrison look this injured? Objection! Maya called out. When were these photos taken? Judge Richardson's gaze, chilling in its intensity, could have melted steel. Miss Williams, you will ask questions during cross-examination, not during opening statements. One more interruption, and you'll be held in contempt. Maya felt the case slipping away. Every piece of evidence she had meticulously prepared was being countered by documents that had seemingly materialized out of thin air. The jury was already looking at her father with suspicion and fear, their perceptions shaped by the prosecutor's manipulative narrative. Walsh moved closer to the jury box, his voice dripping with carefully constructed sincerity. The defendant wants sympathy because he's represented by his daughter. Don't be fooled. Marcus Williams is a dangerous man who uses his fists to solve problems. The evidence will show he attacked Jake Morrison without provocation, sending an innocent man to the hospital. Maya scribbled frantic notes. The photos had to be fake. The complaints had to be fabricated. But how could she prove it? And why was Judge Richardson allowing clearly inadmissible evidence to be presented without scrutiny? In conclusion, Walsh declared, his voice rising to a crescendo, this case isn't about a father's love or a daughter's devotion. It's about holding violent criminals accountable for their actions. The state asks you to find Marcus Williams guilty of aggravated assault and send a message that workplace violence will not be tolerated in our community. Walsh sat down to complete silence. The jury looked convinced. Several members were already shaking their heads at Maya, as if she were a naive child playing dress-up in a serious adult world. Judge Richardson checked his watch. We'll take a 30-minute recess before the defense presents its opening statement. As the courtroom emptied, Maya remained at the defense table, staring at the fabricated evidence that had just decimated her case before it had even begun. Her father leaned over. Maya, baby girl, maybe we should take that plea deal. Walsh is right. I don't want you going down with me. Maya looked at her father's defeated face, then at the prosecutor packing up his perfectly orchestrated lies. In the gallery, Morrison was whispering to someone on his phone, a satisfied smirk on his face. They had been ready for her. Every move she had planned, every argument she had prepared, they had already countered. The fix was in, deeper than she had ever imagined. Maya stood up, her laptop bag heavy on her shoulder. She walked toward the courthouse exit, past the reporters waiting for a statement, past the supporters who had believed in her father's innocence. In the hallway, she pulled out her phone and stared at the USB drive Carlos had given her, the security footage that proved everything. But would Judge Richardson even allow it into evidence? And how could she authenticate it without Carlos, who was probably already being threatened to stay quiet? Maya felt the weight of impossible odds crushing down on her shoulders. She was 17 years old, facing a prosecutor with unlimited resources, a biased judge, and a system designed to chew up people like her father. But as she stood there in the empty hallway, Maya remembered something her father had taught her. Knowledge is the one thing they can't take from us. They had ambushed her with lies. Now it was time to hit back with the truth. Maya returned to the courtroom with a new fire in her eyes, transformed. The 30-minute recess had not broken her. It had forged her into something dangerous, something unyielding. She carried her laptop like a weapon, its contents poised to dismantle the meticulously constructed facade of injustice. The defense may present its opening statement, Judge Richardson announced, barely concealing his irritation. Maya stood, walking to the center of the courtroom, her presence commanding attention. Every person in the packed gallery leaned forward, sensing a shift in the courtroom's atmosphere. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Maya began, her voice carrying a newfound authority and unwavering conviction. The prosecution just told you a story, a carefully crafted fiction designed to send an innocent man to prison. She clicked her laptop, and the large courtroom screen illuminated with a crystal-clear video feed. This is security footage from Morrison Construction on the day of the alleged assault, footage the prosecution somehow forgot to mention. Prosecutor Walsh shot to his feet. Objection! This evidence wasn't disclosed. Your Honor, Maya interrupted smoothly, strategically employing their own tactics against them. The prosecution just introduced undisclosed evidence without warning. I'm simply following their precedent. Judge Richardson's face darkened, his discomfiture evident. Where did you obtain this footage? From the security company contracted by Morrison Construction, the same company that was ordered to delete this evidence. Maya's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade, sharp and incisive. But someone had the courage to preserve the truth. On screen, the footage showed Marcus approaching Morrison calmly, his posture non-confrontational. Morrison's aggressive demeanor was obvious, even without sound. "Watch carefully," Maya instructed the jury, her voice guiding their attention. "You'll see Morrison shove my father first. You'll see my father try to de-escalate. You'll see Morrison attack again." The video played precisely as Carlos had described. Morrison shoved Marcus hard. Marcus stumbled but kept his hands up peacefully. Morrison swung wildly. Only then did Marcus defend himself with one controlled push. The courtroom was dead silent, the undeniable visual evidence dismantling the prosecution's narrative. Several jury members leaned forward, their skepticism about Maya's claims dissolving into a palpable sense of injustice. Walsh jumped up again, frantic. "Your Honor, this footage could be doctored, manipulated." "Could be," Maya conceded, her tone unwavering. "But it wasn't. Your Honor, I call Carlos Martinez to authenticate this evidence." Judge Richardson's knuckles went white around his gavel, his control visibly slipping. "Mr. Martinez was unavailable for testimony." "He's available now," Maya countered, nodding toward the back of the courtroom. Carlos Martinez walked down the aisle, his security uniform crisp, his face set with determination. The gallery murmured as he approached the witness stand, a tangible shift in power dynamics. Judge Richardson leaned forward menacingly, attempting to reassert his authority. "Mr. Martinez, are you certain you want to testify? Perjury charges carry serious penalties." Carlos met his gaze without flinching, his resolve now absolute. "I'm certain, Your Honor. It's time to tell the truth." Maya approached the witness stand. "Mr. Martinez, were you working security on the day of the incident?" "Yes, I witnessed everything." "Did Morrison attack my father first?" "Absolutely. Morrison was aggressive from the start. Your father was trying to protect the crew from a drunk crane operator. Morrison didn't want to hear it." Walsh objected frantically, his strategy collapsing around him. "Your Honor, this witness was thoroughly investigated. He was unavailable." "I was threatened," Carlos stated loudly, his voice resonating through the courtroom. "Morrison told me if I testified, I'd never work construction again. My family would be blacklisted." Maya turned to the jury, her voice rising with righteous indignation. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is how the system works for people like my father. Evidence disappears, witnesses are silenced, truth becomes inconvenient." She clicked to a new slide on her laptop, displaying complex financial documents. "But the corruption goes deeper. Morrison Construction is owned by the Morrison family. Richardson and Associates, Judge Richardson's family business, has received over $2 million in contracts from Morrison Construction in the past 5 years. The courtroom erupted, a cacophony of shocked whispers and gasps. Judge Richardson banged his gavel violently, his face apoplectic. "Miss Williams, you are in contempt." "Your Honor." Maya's voice rose above the chaos, clear and resonant. "These are public records filed with the city clerk's office. Your family business has been steering city contracts to Morrison Construction while you've been sending workers who complain about safety violations to prison." Walsh was on his feet, screaming objections, his perfect record now irrevocably shattered. Judge Richardson's face was purple with rage, but Maya was not finished. "The fabricated complaints against my father, they were filed after Morrison Construction lost a city contract due to safety violations. The fake injury photos were taken weeks after the incident at a private medical facility owned by..." Maya paused for dramatic effect, allowing the implications to sink in before delivering the final devastating blow. "Richardson and Associates." She turned to face Judge Richardson directly, her gaze unwavering. "Your Honor, this isn't just about my father. This is about a systematic corruption scheme that has destroyed dozens of families. Workers who speak up about unsafe conditions get arrested. Their families get destroyed, all so your business can profit." Judge Richardson slammed his gavel, the sound echoing ominously. "I will not tolerate these accusations in my courtroom." Then step down from this case. Maya's voice carried to every corner of the room, a defiant challenge. Recuse yourself. Let an impartial judge hear the evidence. The silence that followed was deafening, laden with the weight of revelation. Judge Richardson stared at Maya, his entire career, his carefully constructed facade of judicial integrity, hanging in the balance. Every person in the courtroom understood the seismic shift occurring. A 17-year-old girl had just exposed a corruption network that reached the highest levels of the city's justice system. Furthermore, Maya continued, her confidence absolute, I have documentation of 43 similar cases. 43 black men sentenced by this court to terms averaging 394% above state guidelines. 43 families destroyed to protect Morrison Construction's interests. She faced the jury one final time, her voice impassioned. Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence is clear. My father is innocent. The real criminals are sitting in this courtroom right now, but they're not at the defendant's table. Maya returned to her seat as the courtroom buzzed with shock and admiration. She had not only destroyed the prosecution's case and proved her father's innocence, but had also exposed a massive corruption scheme. Judge Richardson sat frozen, his world crumbling around him. Walsh shuffled papers frantically, knowing his perfect record was about to be shattered. And Maya Williams, the girl dismissed as a naive child, had just delivered the most devastating legal argument the Cleveland Municipal Courthouse had ever witnessed. The courtroom remained in stunned silence. Judge Richardson gripped his gavel, his face ashen as the full weight of Maya's revelations settled over everyone present. The elaborate corruption scheme he'd meticulously constructed over 12 years had just been meticulously dismantled by a 17-year-old girl. Prosecutor Walsh frantically shuffled through his papers, searching for any fragment, any legal maneuver to salvage his case. But there was nothing left. The fabricated evidence had been exposed, the witness intimidation revealed, and the intricate web of financial connections laid bare for all to see. Judge Richardson's voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. This court will recess for 15 minutes while I consider the evidence presented. But Maya was not finished. She stood one final time, her posture radiating the authority of someone who had just changed history. Your Honor, before you recess, I have one more piece of evidence. Maya pulled out a thick folder. Affidavits from 17 other construction workers who were threatened, arrested, or blacklisted after reporting safety violations to Morrison Construction. All of their cases went through your courtroom. All received sentences far above state guidelines. She placed the folder deliberately on the clerk's desk. These men and their families deserve justice too. Judge Richardson stared at the folder as if it contained poison. His hands trembled as he reached for it, knowing that opening it would irrevocably seal his fate. Your Honor, Maya continued, her voice resonating with moral clarity, the evidence is overwhelming. My father is innocent. The system failed him, but it doesn't have to fail others. Justice demands that you recuse yourself from this case immediately. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, Judge Richardson set down his gavel. His voice was barely audible, devoid of its former arrogance. This court acknowledges that there may be conflicts of interest that prevent me from ruling impartially on this matter. I hereby recuse myself from this case. The courtroom erupted. Reporters rushed for the exits, shouting into their phones, calling their editors with breaking news. The gallery buzzed with excited whispers and applause. Maya's mother burst into tears of profound relief, the emotional dam breaking after months of agonizing uncertainty. But Judge Richardson wasn't done. He looked directly at Maya, his career in ruins, his reputation shattered by a teenager armed with little more than law books and unwavering determination. Miss Williams, he said, his voice carrying a grudging, almost reluctant respect. In 30 years of practice, I have never seen such thorough preparation or fearless advocacy. You have reminded this court what justice is supposed to look like. Maya met his gaze without triumph. only the quiet dignity of someone who had fought for truth and won. "Thank you, Your Honor. All I wanted was a fair trial for my father." Within hours, Judge Patricia Martinez was assigned to the case, a respected jurist renowned for her integrity. She reviewed Maya's extensive evidence in her chambers before court reconvened. When she entered the courtroom, her first words irrevocably changed everything. After reviewing the evidence presented by the defense, this court finds the prosecution's case to be fundamentally flawed and potentially fraudulent. All charges against Marcus Williams are hereby dismissed. Maya felt her knees go weak, a wave of profound relief washing over her. Marcus reached for her hand, tears streaming down his face. His freedom, once an impossible dream, now a tangible reality. Judge Martinez continued, her voice firm. "Furthermore, this court is referring the evidence of corruption and witness intimidation to the State Attorney General's office for immediate investigation. Mr. Richardson, you are hereby barred from hearing any cases pending this investigation." The bailiff approached Marcus with the key to his handcuffs. The metal clicked open, and for the first time in months, Marcus Williams was truly free. Father and daughter embraced, a profound moment of liberation as the courtroom erupted in a thunderous applause. Construction workers who had sacrificed precious work hours to be there were cheering, tears streaming down their faces. Maya's mother rushed to join them, the three of them holding each other in a tableau of immense joy and relief. Prosecutor Walsh quietly packed his files, his perfect record irrevocably shattered by a teenage girl who had refused to accept injustice. Morrison sat in stunned silence, his smug expression replaced by one of dawning fear, knowing that criminal charges were likely imminent. But the most powerful moment came when Carlos Martinez approached Maya as the crowd began to disperse. "Miss Williams," he said, extending his hand, his voice thick with gratitude. "Thank you for giving me the courage to do what was right. My daughter is going to grow up in a world where people fight back because of what you did today." Maya shook his hand, understanding that this victory extended far beyond her father's individual freedom. They had exposed a system of corruption that had devastated countless families. They had shown that truth, armed with courage, could indeed triumph over entrenched power. As they walked down the courthouse steps, Maya was surrounded by reporters shouting questions, but she only had one concise statement. "My father is innocent, and today, justice was served. But this isn't just about one case. This is about holding our system accountable and making sure every family gets the fair trial they deserve." Marcus Williams put his arm around his daughter's shoulders, looking at her with a mixture of wonder and immense pride. The girl who had spent her childhood reading law books in their small apartment had just taken on the most powerful people in the city and won. 6 months later, Maya Williams walked across the stage at her high school graduation, but her cap held more than just a tassel. Tucked inside was her acceptance letter to Harvard Law School with a full scholarship. Not the one she'd almost lost, but a new one, specifically created for students who demonstrate extraordinary courage in pursuing justice, a testament to the ripple effect of her actions. The Williams family apartment looked different now. The same worn law books still lined the walls, but they were now joined by new additions. Framed newspaper articles about the corruption case, a photograph of Maya receiving the Cleveland Bar Association's Young Advocate Award, and letters from grateful families whose loved ones were being retried after Judge Richardson's conviction. Marcus had returned to construction work, but now as a safety supervisor with the authority to shut down dangerous operations. The same crews who had watched him get arrested now looked to him as a leader and protector, a symbol of resilience and reform within the industry. "You know what I'm proudest of?" Marcus asked his daughter as they packed boxes for her move to Cambridge. Maya looked up from folding her clothes. "What, Dad?" "You didn't just save me. You saved every worker who will never have to face a rigged system because you had the courage to expose it." Maya smiled, picking up the worn copy of constitutional law that had started everything. You taught me that knowledge is the one thing they can't take from us, Dad. And you taught me that courage is what turns knowledge into justice. The investigation Maya triggered had resulted in 17 wrongful convictions being overturned. Judge Richardson was serving 5 years for corruption. Morrison Construction had been shut down, its contracts redistributed to companies that actually adhered to safety regulations. But Maya's biggest victory wasn't confined to the courthouse. It was reflected in the dozens of letters she received from young people who saw her story and decided they, too, would refuse to accept injustice in their own lives. At Harvard Law School orientation, Maya stood before 200 of the brightest legal minds in the country. But she knew something they didn't, that the most powerful force in any courtroom isn't prestige or connections or expensive suits. It's someone who refuses to be silent when they witness injustice. As Maya began her studies, she carried with her a simple, profound truth. Every system, no matter how powerful or corrupt, can be changed by one person brave enough to stand up and fight. What injustice will you refuse to accept? Maya asked the camera during her final interview, her voice resonating with purpose. What corruption will you expose? What family will you fight for? She looked directly into the lens, the same unwavering steel in her eyes that had faced down Judge Richardson. They underestimated a black girl with law books and a righteous cause. What are they underestimating about you? The system tried to break the Williams family. Instead, Maya Williams broke the system, and that was just the beginning.